Hi and welcome to the channel. Today what we'll be going over is the fourth phase of a turn, which is called the end phase. So in this phase, we're going to continue on from the previous example we had of the crew phase, and we're going to pick up from the action where we left it off. So the first thing we do in the end phase, obviously we turned all of these crew around in the last phase that we did and showed you because they were all engaged in combat. So the first thing we do is we just simply turn them all back around to indicate that they are ready and willing for the next turn. Now, one thing we can do here also is we can change the order of the troops. So say that I wanted to, and I can only do this once at the end phase. So say I wanted to move these spears up in front of the axemen to protect them and to be the assaulting unit, then I could do that. And same over here, if I wanted to move the swordsmen back, say they did suffer that wound last turn, then they might want to be moved back, but they aren't, and this is how we will continue. So the next thing, we've turned the crew around, as you can see in this end phase. The next thing that happens is the ships drift. Now, the ships aren't anchored to anything but themselves. They're grappled to each other. They've just been rammed, and they're floating around in the wind direction on the seas. So what happens here is we determine the wind factor, and just for the sake of this example, we're going to say the wind is traveling that way. Okay, so we roll a d3. Because they're grappled together, they will both move the same amount. If they had drifted apart this turn, they would each individually move d3. And any other ship that hasn't moved this turn will also drift in the wind direction d3. So let's roll this one. Okay, so we've got a 2. So this is a 2-inch drift, and it'll be in the wind direction, which is roughly this way. And what you'll see here, chunk, they're going to turn right near this terrain. They're getting dangerously close to this terrain. And this will lead us to our next part. So also in the end phase, we have to look at collisions and damage by terrain. And here's another example of where this could happen. So from our previous thing, we drifted there, but say we drifted 3 and these guys actually touched the terrain. Well, it looks like one of the ships touched the terrain, which is this one on the end. This ship would then be classed as having collided with this terrain. And this is a shipwreck terrain. It's treated very similar to light skerries. It can be passed through, but you take damage every turn you have any part of your ship within it. So this ship would be suffering damage at the end phase of the turn. Now, say these ships were still locked in combat and they were like this at the end of the next turn and they didn't manage to get away, and they drifted again, and say they both went in, then both of these ships now are eligible for damage because they're both within the terrain. And this is just something that you have to remember within the end phase itself. It's quite a simple cleanup. So basically you're just turning the crew back around, you're reshuffling them as you want them. The ships drift with any ship that hasn't moved or is grappled drifts in the wind direction, and then any collisions are resolved and you are set up for the next turn.